The biggest mistake I ever made started with a signature, but it was the way she looked at me afterward that changed my life. Asterisk. I was 24, broke enough to count every dollar before buying lunch, and working as a junior financial analyst at Blackridge Holdings. Most employees had never spoken directly to the CEO. I hadn't planned to either. Then Evelyn Carter walked into my office. She was 46. Calm. Precise. The kind of woman who never raised her voice because she never had to. Her tailored charcoal suit looked as effortless as the confidence she carried. She glanced at the reports on my desk, then at me. "You're Daniel, aren't you?" I nodded a little too quickly. "I need 5 minutes." Her office overlooked the city, but she never looked out the windows. Instead, she slid a folder across the desk. My fingertips brushed the paper before I realized it was a marriage contract. A 1-year fake marriage. I laughed once, thinking it had to be a joke. She didn't. "It's a business arrangement," she said quietly. "You'll be compensated generously. There are conditions, and absolute discretion." I searched her face for something, a smile, embarrassment, any sign this conversation was unreal. Nothing. "Why me?" I finally asked. She hesitated. It was the first crack in her composure. "Because," she said, almost under her breath, "you're the only person here who still looks at me like I'm a human being." The room became painfully quiet. Outside, phones rang and printers hummed, but inside her office the silence stretched between us. I noticed the untouched coffee beside her, long gone cold. She folded her hands tightly, then loosened them again. "I don't expect your answer today," she whispered. She stood to leave. As I reached for the folder, our fingers touched for barely a second. She froze. Then she looked into my eyes and asked the one question that made walking away impossible. "Daniel, if this stopped being fake someday, would that scare you?" I carried the contract home, but I never opened it. Instead, I kept hearing her voice. "You're the only person here who still looks at me like I'm a human being." Asterisk. That wasn't something a billionaire CEO was supposed to say. The next morning, her assistant asked me to come to the penthouse office after work. "Ms. Carter needs a favor," she said. A favor. Not a meeting. When I arrived, Evelyn had traded her business suit for a simple cream sweater and dark jeans. For the first time, she looked less like the woman whose name was on the building and more like someone who had forgotten what it felt like to go home to another person. "I need help moving a few boxes," she said, almost apologetically. The boxes held photographs. Awards. Old letters. A wedding album. She noticed me looking at it and quietly closed the cover. "My divorce was finalized 8 months ago." That was all she said. She didn't complain. She didn't blame anyone. Somehow, the silence hurt more. I helped carry the last box into a storage room. Dust floated through the late afternoon sunlight. Neither of us spoke for a while. I caught myself noticing things I shouldn't. The tiredness beneath her eyes. The tiny scar near her wrist. The way she tucked loose strands of hair behind her ear whenever she was trying not to cry. She looked strong in front of the world. But standing 3 feet away, she looked lonely. That realization unsettled me. She was my boss. Almost twice my age. A woman I had no business thinking about after office hours. I should go, I said, forcing myself toward the door. Daniel. I turned. She stepped closer, hesitated, then rested her hand lightly on my arm. Would you stay a little longer? My heart answered before my mouth could. I opened my lips to speak. And nearly admitted the one thing I had promised myself I would never feel. I should have left. Instead, I found myself sitting across from Evelyn in her quiet kitchen, each of us holding a cup of tea that had already gone lukewarm. I don't usually let people into my home, she said, tracing the rim of her mug instead of looking at me. I noticed. A faint smile appeared, then disappeared just as quickly. I spent years building a company, she murmured. Somewhere along the way, I forgot how to build a life. The honesty caught me off guard. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She was simply tired of pretending. Without thinking, I reached across the table. My hand stopped just short of hers. She noticed. Slowly, she closed the distance herself, letting her fingertips rest lightly against mine. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt louder than any confession could have. Then my phone vibrated. The sharp sound broke whatever had settled between us. It was my best friend. Where are you? He asked. Everyone's saying you've been spending time with the boss. Tell me those rumors aren't true. I looked toward Evelyn. She had already withdrawn her hand. I have to go, I answered quietly, ending the call before he could say anything else. This was exactly why I needed distance. She was my employer. A woman carrying scars I couldn't fix. And every minute I stayed made the line between professional and personal harder to see. I stood and reached for my jacket. I'll sign the contract tomorrow, I said, avoiding her eyes. But we keep this strictly business. She nodded. Of course. I made it to the front door before I heard footsteps behind me. Daniel. I turned. She looked at me for a long moment, her composure slipping for the first time since we'd met. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked. Tell me the truth, are you trying to convince me, or yourself? I couldn't answer her. Not because I didn't know the truth. Because I did. Evelyn studied me for a moment, then gave a quiet nod. Then why are you still here? The question landed harder than I expected. I looked toward the elevator. I could leave. Instead, I found myself taking one step back toward her. I don't know. For the first time since I'd met her, she laughed, a soft, almost disbelieving laugh. I hired you because you were honest, she said. Now you're lying to both of us. The words settled between us. I rubbed the back of my neck, searching for an excuse that sounded convincing. There are people who already talk. I know. They'll judge you. I know. They'll think I wanted your money. I know. Every answer came without hesitation. She wasn't afraid of gossip. She was afraid of spending another year pretending she didn't need anyone. I've spent my whole life making decisions with my head, she said quietly. This is the first one that scares me. I finally looked into her eyes. There it was. Not confidence. Not power. Just a woman asking to be seen without the title, the wealth, or the walls she built around herself. Before I realized what I was doing, I stepped close enough to hear her uneven breathing. My hand lifted instinctively, stopping just inches from her face. She didn't move away. Neither did I. The silence stretched so long it almost became its own answer. Then Evelyn whispered the question that changed everything. If I ask you not to walk away tonight, will you? I didn't answer her question. A sharp knock echoed through the penthouse. Evelyn stepped back immediately, smoothing the emotion from her face as if she'd practiced it for years. Come in. The door opened. Her family attorney walked inside carrying a thick folder. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, noticing me. But the board meeting has been moved to tomorrow morning. His eyes shifted between us. Then he placed the folder on the table. I've finalized the marriage agreement. Marriage agreement. Hearing someone else say the words made it feel frighteningly real. The attorney left as quietly as he'd arrived. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Evelyn sat down and opened the folder. There are some things I didn't tell you. I waited. My ex-husband owns enough shares to force a takeover if the board believes I'm unstable. The fake marriage isn't about publicity. She paused. It's about keeping control of the company my parents built. That explained the contract. But it didn't explain us. She reached into the folder and pulled out an old newspaper clipping. My breath caught. The photo showed a charity event from 5 years earlier. I was in the background. Younger. Nervous. Holding the arm of my late mother during her cancer treatment. Evelyn smiled sadly. I remember that day. You were there. I paid for your mother's surgery anonymously. The room spun. You knew who I was all this time. She nodded. You thanked everyone except the woman who signed the check. I couldn't speak. Every assumption I'd made about her cracked apart at once. This wasn't a game to her. It never had been. I looked at the contract, then back at Evelyn. So, when did this stop being about the company? She lowered her eyes for the first time. When she answered, her voice barely carried across the room. It stopped, the day you walked into my office. And suddenly, I no longer knew which of us was protecting the other. I stared at the contract, then quietly closed the folder. I can't sign it. The words hung between us. Evelyn didn't argue. She simply nodded, though I saw her fingers tighten around the edge of the table. I understand. That hurt more than if she'd tried to convince me. I walked to the window overlooking the city. Thousands of lights filled the darkness, yet I'd never felt more uncertain. If I sign because I owe you for helping my mother, I said, then it's not a choice. She remained silent. If I sign because you're my boss, still nothing. And if I sign because I'm afraid of losing you before I've even had the chance to know you. My voice faded. That was the truth I'd been running from. Behind me, I heard her take a slow breath. Daniel. I turned. There were tears in her eyes, but she wasn't trying to hide them. I never wanted gratitude, she whispered. I never wanted obligation. She took a hesitant step toward me. I wanted one person to choose me without the company, without the money, without my last name. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I crossed the distance between us. I didn't kiss her. I simply took her hands in mine. They were colder than I expected. I choose Evelyn, I said quietly. Not Ms. Carter. Not the billionaire everyone sees. Her shoulders trembled with a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. I don't know what people will say. Neither do I. I don't know if this will be easy. It won't. A small, genuine smile appeared on her face. For the first time, neither of us was pretending. I picked up the contract again. Then, with steady hands, I tore it in half. If we're going to marry, I said, meeting her eyes, it won't be because a piece of paper tells us to. She looked at me in stunned silence. Then she whispered. So, what happens now? What happens now? I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. Now. I ask you the right way. A week later, Evelyn resigned as my direct supervisor. It shocked the board, but she refused to let our relationship exist under a power imbalance. She remained CEO, and I transferred to another division where I no longer reported to her. Only then did we begin dating. No contracts. No pretending. No secrets. The board eventually learned the truth about the fake marriage proposal. Instead of scandal, they saw something unexpected. Every legal decision Evelyn had made protected the company. Inside wasn't another agreement. It was a ring. I almost married you because of a contract, I said, laughing softly. I'd rather spend the rest of my life married because we chose each other. Her eyes filled with tears. This time, neither of us looked away. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. A few months later, we exchanged vows in a quiet garden with only close friends and family beside us. There were no reporters, no business headlines, and no billion-dollar announcements. Just two people who had stopped hiding behind fear. Looking back, I realized the fake marriage was never the real story. The real story was about seeing someone beyond their title, their age, their wealth, or their past. Love didn't erase our differences, it asked us to face them honestly. And when two people choose each other with open eyes, trust becomes stronger than fear. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with perfect timing. They begin with one impossible decision. And the courage to make it real. Did you enjoy this story? What kind of romantic stories would you like to hear next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you'd like more heartfelt love stories like this, ***.